Shortly, almost seconds and minutes after Guaido announced that he was the interim president because of fraudulent elections that left doubts about whether Maduro had been rightfully elected, the United States and President Trump immediately recognized him. Canada chimed in moments after, and then the rest of Latin America has also joined in, most of the countries except the Cuban acolytes like Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia, which are standing by their man.
He's got the support of much of the world, as you just noticed. He's got the support, obviously, of hundreds of thousands, if not million-plus people in the country of Venezuela. But Maduro has something important. He has the army.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's you hit the nail on the head, Brian. That's what this is all about, is whether they can get the army to switch their allegiance and go with Guaido and the opposition. And they tried to make a constitutional case. For years, the Venezuelan regime under Maduro has been just scooting by and disregarding the Constitution and the National Assembly. So they're trying to give the National Guard members who carry the guns a reason to join their side. As part of this, they offered an amnesty to them for coming over to their side. They're also trying to force them, because the situation in the country is so bad. The average wage has fallen to below $5 a month, not an hour, not a day, $5 a month. You can't feed your family. You can't buy soap for $5 a month. So there's strife on all of the families, but only the generals at the top are the ones making the money because they're involved in narco trafficking, and they've been indicted by the U.S. and sanctioned by the U.S. for those activities.
You and I have talked extensively also in the past about Citgo. Citgo, of course, the Houston-based refiner that is owned by the government of Venezuela. It has been under siege in the courts. It has been under siege by a hedge fund. It has been under siege by creditors. Now you've got the possibility of an oil blockade. Do you think ultimately this will signal the end of Citgo's ownership by Venezuela? And if so, is that the end of the Venezuelan economy? Because Citgo provides nearly all of Venezuela's government revenue at this point.
Well, they are certainly one of the largest buyers of Venezuelan oil. They're not the only buyers, and some of the other buyers have actually stepped away from Venezuela. That in
Chevron, Valero, and PBF, all obviously U.S. companies, have pulled back, but they are still buyers.
Right. The biggest buyers are Citgo, and then Valero, and then Chevron, which actually has joint ventures. So they're actually not necessarily buying it, but getting their share of their production and importing it to the United States. But Citgo is the linchpin, and it's really the United States is the only one keeping the lights on, because their production has actually fallen. According to OPEC last month, their production has fallen to 1.1 million barrels a day. When Chavez was elected 20 years ago in 1998, Venezuela was producing 3.5 million barrels a day. So in other words, over 20 years, when they should have been increasing their production and had plans to take it to 5 and then to 10 million barrels a day, they actually are down to a third of what they were producing 20 years ago. And as a matter of fact, that 1.1 million barrels a day, they first achieved that as a nation in 1946.
Yeah.
So they have fallen so far behind that they're back to what they did in 1946 before we even had modern technology.
And if that number is even right, I mean, when I was at the OPEC meeting, Russ, in Vienna a couple of months ago, I looked the Venezuelan oil minister in the eye. I asked him how much they're producing. He said 1.6. And I sort of chuckled internally because every other source has them much less than that. Either way, we know OPEC's kind of a game where they're going to put out the numbers that they want. Final question, Russ, is this. Ultimately, is there a possibility of an upside here in terms of production if the Guaido administration does succeed in becoming sort of the ruler, the official leader of that nation, where U.S. companies will reinvest in Venezuela and put some much-needed capital into what are deteriorating oil infrastructure?
There's a huge upside, Brian. You can't imagine. You can walk around in Venezuela, stick an umbrella in the ground, and find oil. So it's easy to get the oil out of the ground. So the sky is the limit. It could be like the gold rush of the 1840s in California and America, if the right government was put back into place. Yeah. If we get a democratic government that follows legal property rights and those things, which the current government has not, which is why they've taken the country with the largest oil reserves in the world and brought it to bankruptcy.